I grew up in a dysfunctional household with my dad being a chronic alcoholic. There was a point in my family of origin where an older brother and his wife instigated an intervention with my dad. His drinking was getting worse as I was getting older in high school, and it was apparent that, this was not bad, and hey, there was an intervention done. One of the things she said was, this seminar is great, but Jesus Christ is free.
Wow.
So we had been dating for 2 years, and she says, I like you, and I would like to move forward in my relationship, and I'm looking for a commitment. And I wanted to bolt out the door. And I'm in the restaurant, and we're having this discussion, and it just cut me to the quick. It really sliced my pride. It was a revelation that, wow, I was prideful. And that, gosh, would I pass upon somebody that loved me? That was powerful.
This podcast is about life change. Sometimes that change happens because of an event or circumstance that makes us realize that we are going the wrong direction. However, sometimes change happens because God brings someone into our life that causes us to question our life, to question the path that we are on and the choices that we are making. Sometimes God speaks to us loudly and so clearly through the people that we meet. Has God ever brought someone into your life? Has God ever got your attention, knocked on your door, bumped into you, said something intriguing to you, done something spectacular, or maybe even loved you when no one else would? Can God invoke change through other people? These are the questions that I want to ask our guest today as he tells us his life change story. Hey friend, why don't you introduce yourself and let the listeners know who you are?
My name is Steve. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. He's my higher power, and I struggle with sexual addiction, pride, and anger.
Hey, Steve. So glad that you came to join me today. We've known each other for several years, but we haven't really had one of these kind of conversations, so I'm really looking forward to talking with you. So the listeners don't know you at all, so why don't you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and tell us a little bit about your family?
Okay. I guess family of origin was what you mean. So I'm the youngest of 7 children. Born and raised in Southern California, lived there for 42 years. Lived the Southern Cal lifestyle with going to the beach, palm trees, deserts, and playing basketball, and moved to Arkansas 19 years ago.
So 7? You're the one of 7.
I'm the youngest of 7.
That is a large family.
Yeah, my dad was in the military, in the Navy, and so he's out, come back, and out serving and come back, and we're all about 2 or 3 years apart.
So, what was it like to be the baby of the family of 7?
I probably was pampered
A little bit, maybe.
Yeah. Yes, that's correct.
So, what's the age difference between you and your oldest?
Gosh, 15, 16 years.
Okay, so
yeah,
whenever you got to be 3, 4, 5, 6,
the others were leaving house.
Okay,
yeah, they were leaving. They were doing the next thing.
So, which one of your siblings were you closest to? Did you have one that you were really a confidant with, or how was it growing up in your household?
Well, my dad was an alcoholic, so I grew up in a dysfunctional household with my dad being a chronic alcoholic. So. There was an older brother who kind of acted like a father figure, and then another brother that acted that way as well. But there are 2 brothers of mine that probably I'm the closest with.
So tell me, what was it like having a father as an alcoholic?
Wow, good question. I would say, he was unavailable as a dad, and that had an impact on me.
So was there any faith in your family? Was God a part of that at all? Did you see any of that in your mom or dad? Or what?
We grew up in the Lutheran church.
Okay.
So we went on a fairly routine basis. I was involved with a youth group. Unfortunately, there wasn't any staying power getting to those events and functions was difficult. And I I ended up getting around other people that weren't of faith and were exploring with drugs. And, I'd seen the effects of alcohol on my dad and felt the effects of alcohol on myself. I didn't like that, but I sure felt like the effects of smoking pot. So I started smoking pot and hanging around with other kids that had that habit. So
you saw alcohol in your dad, and you saw what that was doing there to you and your family, but that didn't deter you from, other substances.
Yeah, that's correct. There was a point in my family of origin where an older brother and his wife instigated an intervention with my dad. His drinking was getting worse as I was getting older in high school, and it was apparent that this was not bad. And hey, there was an intervention done. Bottom line was, hey, Dad, we have a problem here. Instead of not talking about it, we need to address it. And not, there's this pink elephant in the room, and nobody's talking about it. So this was the first time we ever talked about our feelings about it, its impact on us, and it was powerful. I had to go to some Al-Anon meetings, as I recall, and so it was an eye-opening thing about this. So I knew there was dysfunction and that I had a problem as my dad being an alcoholic and the family dynamics all around that. And part of the terms, as I recall, of that intervention was I think my mom was going to separate from him if he went back to drinking. Well, that didn't happen, and I saw this cycle, this dysfunctional thing continue. It left me frustrated and angry. And it was the same, there was no change.
So what happened after high school? Did you go directly from high school to college?
Yep.
Or did you, where did you go to college?
I was on the 10-year plan. Took me a while to get through school. I was working and I tried to do the rock musician thing at one time. So working and playing music and in a garage band, and that really didn't go anywhere. And I'm in college now, and I'm waiting tables. I'm going to school, and I share my background and history with a coworker, and she suggested that I'm in my mid-20s at the time, and she said, "Hey, there's this program that I'd like for you to check out," because this person was like, "Oh, you understand your background, and it's this could help you," and I'm like, "Oh, well, okay." It was a secular humanist program to help you make your life work, okay? And the requirement of that was you had to be sober for the terms. This was a week-long seminar, a week-long seminar. They wanted you basically sober. So, yeah, okay, I probably can do that. And I'm like, well, I'm a recreational user of drugs and alcohol. And I decided to attend. She encouraged me to do this. I said, I'll check this out. At this seminar, I met my future wife. She was sent there by her company, and this woman was a Christian. And one of the processes in that group, there's probably 300 people, and this is in the ballroom of a hotel. In that ballroom, we had to find somebody that we could trust and tell them about yourself. And I'm looking around this room of 300 people, and I'm like, okay, we got to find somebody, because panic starts to set in, because if I'm going to be stuck with somebody. And we connected, and we talked that night and met her and worked through that process, and we started dating shortly after that.
So how open were you about your past and about your recreational drug use, and were you open with that at all, or not?
Yeah, I think I was. We were in a Denny's probably till 3 a.m. that night talking. Okay, and we started dating shortly thereafter. But started dating, and she was a Christian. I had a lot of questions about Jesus and indigenous populations that never heard the word of Jesus. And she was sharing something out of Romans 2:1, I think it is, about God is known throughout the world based. It's His creation.
So she had some answers for you, right?
Yeah, she had some answers basically. The Lord was working on me, and I was searching. One of the things she said was, this seminar is great, but Jesus Christ is free.
Wow.
So we started dating. She was going to a church up in Van Nuys. I'm down in Orange County, and I would go up there and see her on the weekends, and we'd go to church. And Jess Moody was preaching a sermon and said, okay, I need to make a commitment. And so I I dedicated my life to Jesus at that point. That's probably 1986. And so started growing, and we keep dating. So we had been dating for 2 years, and she says, you know, I like you, and I would like to move forward in my relationship, and I'm looking for a commitment. And I wanted to bolt out the door because my parents, the model of marriage wasn't probably the best model. So I'm like, okay. And this woman loves me, and it was like, whoa, I can't grasp that. That's hard. There's a lot of feelings there that we're not in check with, so to speak. And there was a woman that I was waiting tables at a restaurant, and she was a regular customer of mine. And we became a good friendship. My wife had written a sonnet, or copied a sonnet out of a Shakespeare book. It was a love poem. And I shared this with this woman, and she goes, oh dear, she loves you. It was beautiful. This woman was a probation officer.
Really?
With the county. Their offices were nearby the restaurant. She came in on a regular basis. And so she worked at a really interesting segment of population. And she said to me, you know, she loves you. And we had some other conversations. And I was like, well, you know, I was hesitant because my habit with pornography, and pornography telling me that a woman had to look like XYZ. And the reality was my wife, this girl I was dating, didn't look like XYZ. And Marie, the probation officer, said to me, she goes, Steve, Miss Perfect doesn't exist. And besides, she doesn't want to date you anyway. And I'm in the restaurant, we're having this discussion, and it just cut me to the quick. It really sliced my pride. It was a revelation that, wow, I was prideful. And that, gosh, would I pass upon somebody that loved me? That was powerful. So we moved forward, decided, you know, she was sure that she wanted me in her life, but I was not, and worked through that. And so we got married. We're moving on in life. We start going to a purpose-driven church, and so we're learning and growing. And they have this process at the church where they want you to assess elements of your spiritual journey that you could use in ministry. And I did that, and this gentleman by the name of Paul, I met with him and went over this stuff, and he goes, oh, you should get plugged in and Celebrate Recovery. And I said, okay, just because of being an adult child of an alcoholic, there are a ton of character defects that are represented as growing up in that dysfunctional household. And I thought, okay, wow, okay, I need to explore this because I'm stuck. And why am I stuck? Well, I know there's some problems with my growing up in a household where there was an alcoholic father and the consequences and dynamics involved in that.
So what did you learn that first year whenever you started going regularly to Celebrate Recovery? What did you learn about yourself in that first year?
Working through that step study, there was a tremendous amount of anger, resentment, and bitterness towards my dad. Now, I processed some of that in that secular humanist program, but there was another dynamic in there working through that. It was eye-opening, and it was very refreshing to process and release that by sharing that with, in that program we have a sponsor. And so it was very cathartic and healing to let go of that. And the Holy Spirit was working in me in that. Things started to change when I did that first group session step study. I mean, I was growing as a believer, but to plug into working through all that material and unpacking anger, resentment, and bitterness towards my father. And I had some anger and bitterness towards my mother, which I was really surprised was revealed. The secular humanist stuff, that was all about my dad. But through working the STEP program with the Holy Spirit involved in that, there was some revelation about some anger and resentment for my mother's lack of following through with the terms of the intervention. Mm-hmm. And so it was that where things really started to change in that STEP study.
So where did that lead you after you went through your first STEP study? And all that stuff, did you say, I'm going to stick with this, or what happened?
After that first STEP study, I got involved in that. This is where that process of identifying where you could be serving in ministry. And I was committed to being involved in the program. Paul said, hey, this would be great for you. So I wanted to be involved in leadership. That was the next step. And so I participated in that first session, that first STEP study. And the second STEP study, I became involved in leadership. The second STEP study, it was as if the Holy Spirit was saying to me, Steve, you have to deal with your secret sin.
What was that?
And it was my use of pornography.
So was that going on? We haven't talked about it much in your past, but was that been going on since high school?
High school,
the way through even your marriage, right?
And I thought marriage would address that,
but
it did not. And that second STEP study was like God was wanting me to be clean and wanted to use me, but it's like, hey, you need to work on this. So the second STEP study, I worked on a lot of my personal sexual history and processing that, and kind of focused on that in that second session or second group of guys that worked through that. And it was very healing. It's such a powerful attraction, and it's toxic, and it never satisfies.
It's a lie, isn't it?
It's a lie. It's a lie, and Satan gets his hooks into you and I, or into me, or other people that are struggling in this area. Man, it can be destructive.
So after that second STEP study, and you started dealing with that issue in your life, did you have some good sobriety over the pornography?
It was growing, but here was my job would take me across town into parts of L.A. where there were porn shops. This is before the internet, but this was my thing. I had unaccountable time. I was alone, and I would go into these places and view imagery and take that all in. And I'm working in the second STEP study. I'm like, man, I need, this is crazy. I'm alone. I can do this. I'm by myself. No, I'm being transformed, and I got to lean into my relationships with others. I need community in here. That's one of the great things I realized. I wasn't alone in this, that having community in this around me was helpful. And, I wanted to go into this porn shop one day, and I called my sponsor, and we start having, and it's like, hey, I want to go in here and do this, and I want to engage in this material. And he took me off the ledge that day. And we had a good conversation. I didn't go in there that day. A couple of days later, I've got to go to my job's taking me out there, and I'm like, moth to the light there, and I call him again. We have a conversation. We have a conversation about dating my wife and not looking where the grass is greener, but water my own grass. And I'm reading my Bible every day. I'm taking in a little bit of a word, and it's that compulsion starts losing its grip over me. And it felt so good.
Did you come clean to your wife about some of these issues?
Yes.
So whenever you moved here and you got involved in recovery here, because it was kind of probably a nice transition. You were already in recovery in California, and you were already working in that ministry, and you came here and started working in that ministry. So what do you tell guys now? I mean, you've done multiple STEP studies here. So what advice do you give to men who are going through that for the first time?
submit to the process. And John 15:5 comes to mind. Okay. I am the vine, you are the branches. Abide in me, and I abide in you. For without that, you can do nothing.
Get connected and stay connected. Right?
Yes.
Get connected to the vine and abide
Yes.
in the vine. So,
Yes.
yeah. So what advice would you give to someone who's listening today that maybe has a similar background to you? You know, they're an adult child of an alcoholic. You know, that's the way you grew up. You grew up with an alcoholic, and there's maybe some resentment, some hurt, some pain from there. Maybe they've medicated or done whatever. What advice would you give to them that says, hey, I realize that there's a problem, there's an issue with me, I feel broken. Where do I go from here?
My encouragement would to be start unpacking some of these feelings and emotions, and unpacking some of the behaviors that may be getting in your way of where you need to be, and invite God and his Spirit in you to work and transforming you, being open to his guidance. And then at some point, hey, plug into the program where there's a systematic material that helps unpack some of the deep hurt.
Right. I love that Lamentations 3:40 that says, let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. And that's really kind of what you described even in your first and second step studies, where you examined your life and you did a deep inventory, a deep dive into your psyche and into your feelings. And as you did that, you returned to the Lord. You turned your focus to God. And as you turned that, then you allowed him into those areas of your life, and you started receiving healing. Are you still sober from pornography? And
yes.
So how long do you celebrate sobriety over that?
It's 18 years.
18 years. That's amazing.
One day at a time.
One day at a time. Thanks, Steve, for sharing your story with us. Hey, if you are listening today and you feel God is speaking to you through Steve's story, maybe God has brought someone into your life. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's a loved one. Or maybe it's a future loved one. Whatever the case, God is speaking to you. Will you listen? Are you willing to change? Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time.